Hey, how are you doing? Almost finished. Oh, thank you for coming.
Kind of bad. I'm fighting that.
Oh, okay. So I did some revision with the lab itself. So we are gonna have to make the VM. I think some of you already got started because we came a little bit early, but I'm gonna walk you through that. This was part of lab 9, the first portion, but we had some mismatch in the OS because we had ISO download issue. So I had grabbed the new link for the download. So some of this looked very familiar from lab from a few weeks ago. Okay. So you're just gonna need the drive for storage today for your own virtual machine. I would encourage you to keep it on the drive and label the drive before you go in case you need it again. Okay. So today we're going to learn how to install server roles and create policies and user accounts because many of you are going to be in this area to manage user accounts, reset password, working with Active Directory, you know, changing configuration for Windows Server because many businesses own Windows Server. So we are gonna do some practice in the installation and the setup for it. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to visit the website. You can also search for Server 2019 ISO download, and it's gonna take you a few minutes to download the ISO. Okay, it's going to bring you to Microsoft website when you click the link on the lab page. And I'm sorry, I just modified the lab. So if you downloaded it earlier today or yesterday, make sure you re-download the lab again. Okay, so click on the link, download the ISO. It's going to bring you to this page. Let me click it again to reload the page. It's going to take you here and you are going to download the 64-bit version English, right? The evaluation version. So once you click that, it's going to download it and store it on your downloads folder. We need this. It's only going to take a couple minutes to do that. And this is going to allow you to use the different edition in server. So currently there's standard and data center. So data center is going to be for the larger corporation, the enterprise, where the standard is for medium to small business. So you can download one version and you can use it in variation. Okay. This is evaluation copy, so it gives you 180 days. After that, you have to pay for the license, and server charge you per seat. That means that if you have 1,000 users, you are going to have to pay for 1,000 user connecting to your server. So this is why most web server uses Linux because it's open source, so they don't have to pay for 50 million users or 10,000 users that they have on the web server. Windows is proprietary and they charge per account. So each of you that log into your RCCD account, right? RCCD pay per person license. Usually we would group them. So they have different tier. 2,000, it's going to be so much per person, and so on. So as you grow, software is very pricey. Okay. So we have to scale with the company's need. So once you download the ISO, we're going to come back here. You're going to open up your virtual box. So go ahead and open up the app by searching for it. And once you click on it, you're going to be in the app. And then you're going to click the star button, which is step 2, right? We need to have the ISO, then we're going to make a new. We did this before, and my windows went into the second screen. So this is going to come up. You're going to give it a name. So I prefer to name it the OS name. So server 2019. And if you want, you can put your initial, doesn't matter. And I would put VM. And then, so that is, so here you can name it like what I suggested here. We can say CIS25 or just server 2019. Then we're going to click the drop down option here. And sorry, my whoever that taught in this classroom earlier, they had used the second monitor, which I don't because I can't share screen. All right, so you're gonna click other and you're gonna click cancel when that message pop up, and you're gonna browse to your USB. And you can make it onto your USB. Now, if you decided to make it on your desktop, which I probably will, you just need to copy the folder to the USB later on. And that would normally take about 6-7 minutes. So we can click desktop or USB if you have it. Use the larger drive that we borrow there. And then we're just going to name it. So put your initial or your name. And then we will put server 2019 VM. Okay, so make a folder for it because it's going to have multiple files. We're going to do select, right? Select the folder. So once you have the folder, which is step 5 and 6, it's going to show the path here. Then the ISO is going to come from your download from step 1. So click that and then select other. And you are going to be able to see go to downloads and then find your downloaded file from step 1. Okay. So I created the folder for my virtual machine. I named my virtual machine. I now link my ISO file to, because it's going to need this to install and boot. So I'm at step 8. Okay. And then here we can select the edition that is needed, but very important, you cannot skip this. So check this box, skip unattended installation, because if you don't, you're not going to know the password. They have an automated password, right? You can change it in virtual machine settings, but it probably take you a lot longer to figure that out than to just select this option. So select skip unattended installation. Now, unattended installation allows the software, which is VirtualBox, to be able to plug in all the things for you based on the file that is set up. So the IT team, they use it to test things. So they would have their own file and we don't know what their password would be. So we would click this. And then you're going to go to next. Very important that we change this to 8,000 meg. So change that to 8,000. And that's the minimal for server. You're going to see that it is a little slow. It's going to be laggy when you move your cursor. It might not respond right away. Be patient with it today. And then you're going to change this to quad core, so 4. So 8 gig of RAM and 4 processor. Okay. So coming back here, I'm at step 11. So it's gonna look, sorry, where did I? It's gonna look like that. And then we're gonna go next. And for the drive, recommended that we would go at least a lot bigger than 100 gig, right? But for the sake of the exercise, we're gonna go 100 here. 50 is the minimal. So 100 gig is going to give you enough space to install all the things that you need for the basic server. But normally we would recommend, you know, multiple disks of terabytes, because if you have a lot of users and if you're doing file and storage server or file server, you will need a lot of drive space. We're going to go to next, and then we're going to finish. I'm going to remove this because VirtualBox does not like the same name from the library. All right, so we have our new server set up here, and you can always change your settings. So if you have things like that, you can go into settings before you start. You cannot modify RAM and processor once you start, okay? So once that's popping up on my library list, I can play it by clicking start. We did this before, so you can whip through this in a few steps, and it's gonna power it up. Now the ISO allows it to put the boot files, and it's gonna load the install files now, okay? So in the old Windows, it uses boot ini or boot ini. It's still reverting back to the boot files, and it plays the boot files onto the boot sector, which is a section of your drive space that you create out of the 100 gig. So it makes a small amount of space for the boot files, and it's going to always use those files to boot your OS. Hi. So when this pops up, we are going to keep it the same because we speak English and we live in the United States. We're going to go next, and then you're going to click install. Now, for most company, when you, let's say that you work for a company and they want to upgrade their server system, right? You don't install on top of what you already have. What you do is you have a new server hardware, or server tower, or a rack. You are going to test it first. So you're going to install the OS on it and then migrate everything over. This is very important here. Do not click next without looking at the option here. So we're going to do the desktop experience data center. That's going to give you more features for enterprise level. You can do the standard, but desktop is going to give you graphical user interface to click. Otherwise, you have to use command prompt. So make sure we select the last option on the list here. Okay. Make it easy. And then we're going to go next. And then I have to accept the license agreement for Microsoft, go next. And I normally do the custom install only because in IT, we normally deal with partitioning, and we talked about this last time, but we can click this part and then you can install on the entire drive. So after that, you just go next and it's going to format it for you. And this process is going to take about 10 minutes. Okay, so as I proceed through, I make sure that I have the data center desktop experience. That's very important. Okay. Otherwise, I will ask you to do it again. Okay. Now, once it's done, it's going to reboot. And when you see it reboot, Windows desktop's going to load. The first time that you log in, you have to click input keyboard and then press Control-Alt-Delete. What do I mean? So you're going to go input keyboard and then Control-Alt-Delete there. Okay. Because if you press Control-Alt-Delete on your keyboard, that's just for the host computer on the outside. The inside system, because it's software oriented, it won't know that that's what you want. So we're going to tell it through the software input keyboard. So once it's finished here, it's going to restart, and then that's what you're going to get. Okay. So what I'm going to do after that is I will walk you through on how to configure a static IP. Servers don't change IP addresses, so we need to make sure that we have the appropriate IP address to use. And I chose class A here. And then I'll walk you through on how to configure your roles. And we will go through and answer some questions and take screenshots accordingly. So we are going to install a few things. We are going to install first the domain, the DNS server. So the .com, .edu, .net, .it, all of those are, when you visit their website, it's basically you're visiting a web server that's connecting with a domain name server. So we are going to install the DNS, which is your domain name system or server. We are going to also install an Active Directory, which is how we're going to be able to add the user accounts and groups on our network. And it is a database or repositories type of environment where you can add objects. Sometimes those can be automated system like computer, or it could be groups, or it could be users. So I just walked my network class yesterday through this, and they need to create a group for their VPN users, right, for remote access. So similarly, you're going to see today for this class that you are going to use Active Directory to be able to control the resources and the objects inside your network. Okay. This is a very important area. So when you look for like networking job or even security job, it might say ADDS or ADS, Active Directory service, having the knowledge in that, especially for Windows security. Okay. Because it controls access for user account. And then we're going to make some groups and users, and we're going to control and set rules for those users. So if you have certain users who are not allowed to access a certain part or a certain system, we can use group policy to do that. So security, this is an important area for Windows. Okay. So when you start looking for work, you're going to see that for Windows administration, they normally address this in Active Directory and other roles, of course. But for this class, that's the focus for today. So most of us is going to service in this area. So I want to make sure that you understand how to do this. Okay. Any question? So we wait for this to be done. Let's see what else. And also, I put some information here, and I went over this with my class yesterday too. When you work with server system, try to put things in containers. That means that if I have users, I want to put them into groups, right? And sometimes you can have a group within a group. That's what we call group nesting. So everybody, when you create a user account, everybody is going to be a domain user, right? On the network, a domain encompasses, right, a server that's going to translate IP address to name, like a DNS. So once you promote a domain controller, when you create a DNS, it's going to create a domain like a .com, right? You hear this all the time. Visit my domain, like a URL, a .net, a .edu. So your top level domain has a root, would be referred to first level root, which is .com, .edu, .gov. Those are first level. And then you also have other level, like you would see like .it, .io, etc., which is on the lower level. Now, CIS40C kind of goes over the details, a lot of this, and also the 40D. 40C focuses specifically on Windows administration. Microsoft has a certification that has 4 parts, and it also have Azure for the certification. So if you want to get into this area, there's highly there's always a need for that type of skills. Okay. So here it talks about universal group. It would contain the people or the users and groups inside the universal group. So universal groups do not care about trust. So when you have two server talking, right? In order to really exchange data and sync, it needs to establish a trust. So that means that as an administrator, I need to set up a site trust. I can have the parent domain, which could be like mycompany.com, and the child domain is branch1.mycompany.com. So in order to replicate information, I can add user accounts onto mycompany.com and then replicate that information onto the second server through Active Directory and domain services. So that way I don't have to recreate that account at every single server in my enterprise. What if you have 1,000 servers? You don't want to repeat the same process across. It's all about centralizing and central management. Yes. I'm sorry? Yeah, so put it under that. So go back. Is that your regular directory? So the other. Yeah, the UC even though it's not the same, but normally those things go right to the regular website. People are being external. Okay, so as we were saying, that it needs to have trust. So I can create a group in the parent domain, and then it's going to carry that to all the other servers. So if I have people that would work in multiple branches, right, that will be ideal. We want to centralize management so that way we don't repeat the process and we would maximize the resources that we have. So what you can do is you can create, and so here in this particular group, it doesn't care about trust. So that means that you can have a group in this type of group, right? A group that's that type. But it's not going to be your global group. So it won't be at the global level. So the way that I teach this is when you're looking at the local, that's your system locally. Think about like your local area, right? So normally you would have, this is within my small network, right? And as I expand to the enterprise level, I would grow out. So you would put them into the global group. Now, these two don't interchange. So at the universal level, that's the enterprise level, but they cannot be in the global group. Okay. So sometimes we don't want certain groups to be at the global level. We would put them into the universal. And when you create a group UC, you would be able to select one or the other. So it's going to default to your global group. So, and global group require that there's trust in the domains, right? So within our companies, we have domains that are trusted. But what if you have partnership? What if you have vendor, right? Like, for example, if I'm Walmart, I might have vendor like Disney, Warner Brothers that sells products to me. They might not have full trust across the domain, but we do exchange data with our databases. However, and they don't always establish the complete trust. Some things are trusted, some things are not, right? So you would have something and you would have to set up various groups. So that means what? I can create a universal group for the managers from Disney and Warner Brothers who are my vendors. And for my internal people, I will put them on the global group, right? Like my executives, my managers, my employees. And then locally at the branch, right, I can also create the domain local group. So normally we function here at the higher level, right, at the enterprise level. And then this is going to expand out to the enterprise with, you know, external resources and partnership. Okay, so we're going to see some of this later so you can see. So here, when you get to this point, just make a password. Make sure you remember your password. So just to keep it easy, I'm just going to call it CIS25 exclamation point. CIS25. And then, oh, when did I type? Yeah, so when we finish, it's gonna do its thing. So this is what I referred to earlier. You're gonna, when you see this, go import, input keyboard, Control-Alt-Delete. So before you become the domain, you're gonna see the administrator account. By default, Windows Server bring forward the administrator account, where Windows 10 or 11 is a client system. It's not a server system. It hides the administrator account, right? The server, it's going to give you the initial account as admin, and you can create another account locally to be able to manage your system. And you should not use your admin account for security practices, right? So for here, we're just going to log in. And then it's going to take a little bit to load your profile. If it does seem a little slow, just be patient with it, like I said. Okay. So when this pop up, just click no. So when your desktop loads, Server Managers is always going to come up. This is Windows or Microsoft way of helping you administer your system. Okay. Now, normally it does the inventory and you want things to be green here. So when there is red, that means that some of your services are not working and you need to really configure. And then you can use the admin center. So just click close for this. So the first step in having this, the configuration, before we install any roles, we need to set up a static IP. Server needs to be shared across our network, right? It's the centralized system, so you cannot have it change IP. It's kind of like, you know, if you're given a name, everybody knows you as that name permanently. If your name changes, right, and you know, if your job needs you, how are they going to be able to contact you? So if other system needs to communicate, it's going to refer to the IP address to communicate, right? So when you see the manager dashboard, you're going to click local server. And here is the summary of your system, okay? The computer name is going to be your server name. This is the default computer name. Most administrators have a practice in changing the name. I'll show you that now. I know that I didn't include this step, but I'm going to show you that. So let's say that this is my corporate office servers, right? You're going to click the name and this is going to pop up. That's simply the properties of your computer. Then you click change and then you just type in the name like HQ server 1, right? And you want to set up the domain, which is we're gonna make itself a domain. So it is serving many roles. It's kind of like you are serving many roles. You're a student, you're a parent, maybe some of you, right? You are a son or daughter, or you know, someone in the family. So the server itself can take on many roles, but it sees itself as a computer name, a server name here. Okay, so we're gonna keep the default now, and our domain is gonna be the domain once we promote it. So to change the IP address, we click the local server on the dashboard or the server manager, and we're gonna click this link right here. IP address assigned. It's going to take you to the Ethernet property. You can double click this to go to its property and click properties button. Go to TCP IP, click its property, and this is where you're going to put in the IP. So I'm going to use the suggested IP from the lab. So what am I doing here is I am at this step 30. Okay. So once that loads, it's fairly fast. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in 12 dots. I think it's .10.10. And the X, don't type X. Put in a number that could be from 10 to 100. You can go all the way to 254. So I'm going to pick a number and you don't have to use the same as me. Okay. So I'm going to use 70. And then the subnet mask, you simply click it and it's going to fill that in. The default gateway is going to be your router. It's always going to be the first system entering from the internet. So we're going to put 12.10. Oops. .10.1. Okay. Logically, this is going to be the first system that's going to route all the traffic. It's like the gate to your mansion, right? That's called the gateway. And then after that, the .2 will be the firewall. The .3 might be other switches. The .4 might be another server. The .5 and so on. So my server, I can even use an earlier number. So we would dedicate some of the IP addresses to our shared or our network systems. And then the preferred DNS, we're going to put the same IP address as our computer, because remember what I said, it takes on many roles. Itself is a DNS, which is a domain name system. Okay. So after this class, you should be able to put down that you have practiced, right? Installing Server 2019 Data Center Edition, and then configuring static IP, which is what we're doing, and then installing DNS and Active Directory in Windows Server 2019. Any question? Okay, so same IP as the DNS. And if you have an alternate one, you would put its IP here. We don't. And then the .1 for the gateway. Okay. So that's why I put for step 33. And then at this point, you would do a screenshot, right, for this. And click OK. And click close. Now, the IPv6, we don't configure that yet. We only configure for the version 4. That's typically the practice, right? But you can also configure version 6. And click close. So once you do that, it's going to take a few seconds for this to update. What you can do is you can also close and reopen it. So I'm going to click back and then click that again to see the update. So you should see that there. Question? Okay, so we learned that the most important step before we start installing server roles and features is to put static permanent IP address for our system. Okay, and that is through the local server configuration. Okay, then we're going to go back to our dashboard now. And we're going to add a role. We're going to have it take on a role. Most cloud environment, so if I buy AWS service, I have an option to create an instance. So basically I'm renting the hardware like you know, CPU and RAM and storage from Amazon. And I can use the hardware to install an instance, Windows instance, like this, Server 2019. So they will give me option. And that could be varied for the service based on the price, right? And so you would see a lot of this happening sometime, and that is all virtual machine on someone else's system, right? All right. Next, we're gonna, after we had put in the IP address and updated, we are going back to Server Manager dashboard, and we're gonna add a role. So I'm at step 36. So here we're gonna click Add Roles and Feature. And you're gonna see this. So read this, and it tells you that this is the wizard, right? And it asks you, it says, what is the name? So when we click next, the role-based feature, it's going to tell you the summary of your system and the IP address. So when we go next here, sorry, my system, my computer kind of slowed down a little bit. It tells me that this is my server name, right? So write that down on your, when you see that, put that on your answer, and then the IP address. See how it's wrong here, right? Why is it showing 10.0.2.15 is because that's an IP address that RCCD gave my computer before I changed it, right? So what I can do is, you know, if you leave it like this, it's going to take on the other one because it hasn't recorded the IP address from the past, but we can always check. Okay. All right. We're going to go next. So put down the answer. It should be the same IP address as this, but it shows me the 10.0.0.15 for my VM. We are going to select DNS. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do both together. So that way you don't have to finish DNS and do Active Directory. So we're going to do this portion and the next portion together, okay, in one shot. And then I'm going to help you configure, but you can do them separately. The reason why I wrote it separately, so it's less confusing, but most administrator, when for a new server, they would do things, the same thing together, right? So you're going to click DNS. And it tells you that this is going to be for remote server. It's going to add the administration tool for remote server and the DNS management console, which is the server tool for the DNS. So you're going to do features. Okay. And then I'm going to also click Active Directory. But be careful here, because if you select the wrong one, it's not going to have the right feature for you. So we're going to select the second option and from the top, this one, Active Directory Domain Service. Okay. And it tells you that it's going to add the group policy, administrative tools, all the command line. So your ADDS, that's what you're selecting, Active Directory Service, add feature. So that's the second part of this. And then you're going to go next, and then next. And so here is where we can answer some questions, right? It tells you what DNS means, and it tells you what you should need. Okay. So it says DNS server integration with Active Directory automatically replicates the DNS data along with directory service data, making it easier to manage the DNS. We talked about centralizing management earlier. And it requires the DNS server to be installed on the network. So you have to have this role on one of your system as a server. So it tells you that here. And you need to use Active Directory Domain Services to be able to manage that role. So your all your objects underneath that for that server. Okay. And then we're gonna go next. And here is where you can answer the question. So I'm gonna show you which question to answer. 64. Okay. It asks you what does Active Directory services store, and how many domain controllers are recommended? Why? Okay. So it tells you Active Directory domain services, ADDS, stores information about users, computer, and other devices on the network. So basically, it is a database that contains users, computers, and systems. It helps administrators securely manage this information and facilitate resource sharing and collaboration between the users. So I can throw them into a group, and or that user is allowed or not allowed sharing files, folders, printers, etc., resources. So I can manage resources through Active Directory. It requires DNS server to be installed on the network. If you do not have it, you have to install DNS server role. And it tells you here, to help ensure that the user can still log into the network in the case of outage, install a minimum of 2 domain controller for a domain. But in reality, you have to have at least 1. It's recommended 2 for redundancy or in case of failover, right? So you should have 2, but it needs to have at least 1. Any question? So that's the answer for number 64, A and B. So Active Directory stores users, computers, and devices or systems. And it should have 2 domain controllers in case of outage, but it needs to have at least 1. We'll be done before 8, trust me. It seems long, the steps, but you'll be all right. Once you finish the install, it's fast. Any question here? Okay, so we're going to proceed to next. It gives you everything that you need here, right? And then click install. You're going to wait for the blue bar to reach its full, and then we're going to close. So this is going to take about 7 minutes. So as you finish install, you notice these tools are listed here. It's going to put it into the tools menu at the top right. Whenever that you need to administer a component or a role in your server, in Windows Server, you are going to go to tools. Even though on the dashboard, it's going to start adding the roles that you have. So the dashboard it's mainly going to give you the status of that role. Is it healthy? Is it performing? Is it not okay? If you see red, that's not good, right? Error, no error information. So the dashboard kind of give you like the overall view of the health of your roles for your system. But if you need to really configure, you need to go to the tools on the top right. Okay. So when this blue bar reaches the end, I can close, but I want to make sure that it finished all the install. So it puts everything there. So now I'm done, right? And then, so we're going to go ahead and click close. So as you notice, now that I have 2 roles, right? It wasn't there before. And then on the left, it's also giving me the dashboard for those. So if I click this right here, notice that I get a little prompt, right? So installing the role doesn't mean that it's working, right? It's there. You have the tools to use, but we have to configure. And then same thing with the DNS. Okay, now it takes on the right IP that we did earlier. Okay, so now I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna do 40 to 56. Actually, we did this. I'm gonna go to 48 and to 56. And then I'm gonna do the second part for the Active Directory. So we already installed DNS. So we're gonna do 48 to 56 now. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on Tools, and as you install the role, you would see DNS. So as you add more roles here, you're gonna see more, right? For my students from yesterday, they did VPN and remote access. So they would see the routing and remote access that's on there. So we have DNS install, and then your Active Directory are here. So we're gonna click DNS from Tools at the top. And since you only have one server, it's gonna show the name right here. Everything that you need to configure for that server is gonna be here. Okay. Later on, when you go to work, you're gonna find that if you have other sub-server or other servers, it's gonna also list that on the network here. Right. So I only have one server, so I can click that and I would see what I need to configure. Okay, again, I access the DNS manager from Tools and click DNS. So I'm at 48. So next, I'm going to go ahead and make a zone. So think of a zone is a way that we would, so DNS, its job is to convert, right, IP to the domain name, okay? So if we say, so domain is really for human, the computer just knows IP address. So we have to find a way for it to translate what that .com, .edu, all of that into a system that has an IP address. So it is a system that has an IP address, but we need to configure it so that way it understands this IP address is this name. Okay. So we are going to click on that, and you can go right click on your server itself, and you're going to make a new zone. We're going to go next. And we are going to start with the primary zone. So if you're studying for Microsoft certification, you have to know what all of these are. So it tells you here that it creates a copy of the zone that's updated directly on the server. You can also make a secondary zone that's just a copy of an existent on another server. So if I have another server remotely, I would make a secondary zone and link it to the server. And then I can also make a stub zone. Now DNS is prone for attack, so it keeps the record information of how name is translated to IP. So what we're going to do is we're going to go next here. And it is a forward lookup zone. So it's going to do the .com to the IP address that we give it, the 12.10.10.70, right? So we're going to do a forward lookup zone. We're going to go next. And then you can give it a zone name. So I'm just gonna, you can put your name or initial if you want, but I'm just gonna keep this as a, so let's call it HQ zone. Sometimes people name it like branch 1, Southern California region, HQ, etc. Right? It's really how this is going to represent the server that's on your diagram, your network diagram. We're gonna go next here, and it's gonna create this file called with the name, and it's the .dns. We're gonna go next. And this is when the security comes up, right? You don't want dynamic updates. You have to control updates through Active Directory. You want secure updates. So in the future, we would probably have to configure it for secure updates when we have multiple servers. So right now, I just use the default and do not allow dynamic updates and then click finish. So what's gonna happen is if you expand this now and expand it again, my zone exists, right? And as you take some networking classes and security class, they talk about DNS record, right? In security like CIS25 or CIS40A. So this is where you would find your NS record. Now, in the case where they do DNS poisoning, they just need to find the record, either corrupt or modify the actual DNS file, which contains the record for your server. Okay, so we need to make sure we protect the DNS server, because without a domain, people cannot log in, right? Like rccd.edu, you can't log into your account, your email, and so on. Any question? Even when you think about like your Gmail account and all of that, right? That ties to an email server, which is tied to a domain. Now, the reverse lookup zone is when it does the IP to the name. So we rarely use this. So you would use the wizard to set it up. And then if you do secure updates, you have to set up trust points. And if you have forwarders, those are like middle system that pass to the request to the DNS, you can set that up there. It's really easy. You just simply, look at the wizard, and then if you're not sure, you can also use their help option. Okay. So we did all of that for the new zone, the primary zone. You can do, that, whatever name that you want that would be appropriate for the business, that's fine. So we did all of that, right? 48 to 56 in like a few minutes. Now we're done with the DNS, so we can close this management console. And then we're going to go to tools, and we're going to do the Active Directory. Okay. So we already did this part. We did the install already. And we answered the question. Now, when you go to your dashboard, right, your server manager, if you click on ADDS, you should see this yellow link. And you're going to click more. So what that does is it's telling you that there needs to be configuration for your domain controller. You install it, but it's not ready. So once I click that yellow link, you can also click notification and go back to that, right? I'm going to find this link right here, promote the server as a domain controller. Okay, so how did I get here? I go to ADDS on the left, on the server manager, and then I find this, I click more, and then there's a link. It says promote the server right here under action. You're going to click that. And some of you have seen this already in the other class. We're going to, because it is the first server of its kind in the network, so we are going to make a new forest. Now, if you add subsequent server after this, you would select the other option. right? So think about like each server is going to be tree in our big forest, right? And we are going to be new, so we're going to make a new forest. And then this is going to be your domain name, okay? You can stick to something generic like myorganization.com, mycompany.com. You can put your name.com. So let's do that. Then we're going to go next. After we put our domain, we're going to go next. Now you know that DNS, also public DNS, as you know, for websites and things, are registered, right? So we can't just do pacingwin.com. If it doesn't exist, you can get a host company to establish that service and you pay them. Something like Coca-Cola.com, Nike.com, Reebok.com, those are already been owned. So they publicly registered that. There is a list of all the public DNS in the world, right? And IANA maintain that. So the International Association that manages IP address, public IP address, and all of that, they maintain the DNS record. I heard it is in the vault, right? Nobody can really see that, but we can find DNS information online by using Whois, if it's not Shield. Okay. So I went through, right? I clicked the promotion link here, 68. I put in my .com information. And then now I'm at the controller configuration. You have to pay attention to this, right? It says this is the forest functional level, domain functional level. But I'm using server 2019. My functional level is going to be the prior version. The reason why Microsoft did this is because they want older server to be compatible with your new server in the new forest. So if you have a very old server, right, you would need to select the older ones here. But if you have all new stuff, you can just keep it 2016 and newer. Okay. And it's going to create the domain name system server, your global catalog. I normally don't use read-only domain controller because that's no longer used for modern system, but you can if you select that. And this password is going to be the recovery, the restore. So in the case something happens, right, we can restore it using this password. So you can give it a password. And confirm. And then proceed. And it tells me that there needs to be an delegation, an authoritative parenting zone cannot be found. I haven't delegate which server is going to be in charge yet. So, and it tells you right here. It says delegation for DNS server cannot be created because authoritative parent zone cannot be found. So I have to create this first to delegate a certain server. I don't have a server yet. I'm finishing it. So, and even if you select this, right, it won't let you select this because you don't have a parent zone. Okay, so you can always reconfigure that at another time. I'll show you where. Then we're gonna go next. And then for the NetBIOS name, that's normally for system that cannot use IP address and it needs to find other system by system name, like host name. And if you don't fill out anything, it's just gonna plug in the name minus the root, which is .com or .gov or .edu. We're gonna go next. And then it's gonna write these files. NTDS, this volume folder. And then we want to check out everything. I think it's fine. And we're gonna click next. And this is gonna take a few minutes. So it needs to verify, validate information for your server, right? It's looking at the prerequisite, and then it's gonna allow you to install. Okay, so if it fails, then you have to go back. It will tell you where to go fix. So if you don't have a static IP, that's where it's gonna fail. Okay. Okay, so it gives me some information here. It tells me that the default security settings, this should be changed, right? That is a security issue. So I need to make sure that I change this later. Delegation, we already knew about that. Everything is checked out. So now we can click install and it's gonna load the service and all of that. Let's take a few minutes. And take a screenshot. You don't have to shut it down. We're gonna go ahead and create the account in ADDS and group policy, and it's only gonna take a few minutes to do that. It seems long, but once you go through the clicks, it's really quick. And then you can screenshot, and then that will be our lab for today. So with that, just now, we learned how to install Active Directory, right? Especially domain controller, new in the forest, through Active Directory. So you promoted a domain controller for Active Directory, okay? And so when you look at like network administrator job or networking job, a lot of them would refer to Windows servers and things. So you see ADDS or Active Directory, DNS, DHCP. Okay. So it's gonna want to restart. And then after it reboots, we'll log back in and then we'll make the user accounts and groups. Any questions? Yeah. Before the manager is open and see if it's gonna let you. put in the icon, you put in the version of itself. Because that's what you do. So. Yeah, it's just gonna be slow and slow as the iPhone comes to it because it's using the host RAM to run it and to install the YouTube. So speed and run all together. That's super cool. And mine takes a little bit to boot. Other questions? So let's wait for it. Okay. So just restart it. See if it's gonna, because it's gonna stop the service and then start the service for you. So just hit the power button. Normally we don't start servers so much unless you do reconfigure a problem. Right, so it's a problem. So it might take a little good minute to get going, like in my case. All right, so then we're gonna do input, insert, Control Alt Delete. Now you notice that now I have a domain. So once you promote your system, you're gonna be the administrator for your domain. So that's the next level administration. We log in. And then we're gonna start with this part, the last part. And this is always gonna pop up so you can close it. This is gonna give me the status, right? You can see it tells me that some of my services are failing here, so I can check that out. What's going on with my, okay. So it takes a second to put all the roles there. Then we're gonna go to users and computers. And then we're gonna go to our .com. Under that, you should see the user folder. These are the default groups and users. So one head is the user, it says the user. The double heads are the groups, and you notice they are security groups. And if you expand it, you can tell. So we can throw those people into the default. These are called Microsoft built-in users and groups, or we can customize it. So if you need to make a user, you can right-click the folder, choose new user. That's where I normally start. Some people, they start with the group and then they make a user, but either way, you still have to make a user. Or you can also right-click on the right, new, same thing, user, and then you can give it a name. So we need to make a couple user, Kyle Johnson and Dora Hernandez, and we're gonna add them to the workers group. We're gonna take a screenshot. Okay. So Kyle is the first name, last name is Johnson. And we are gonna give it a login name. So normally first initial, last name. Some company uses employee number or employee ID. And then it's always gonna be your .com or your domain name here. We're gonna click next. We're gonna give it a default password. It needs to be complex and long to meet the default policy. So you can use the recommended password. And I would allow by default the user to change the password for the try. Now, if they get fired or they leave the company, you would select account disable. You don't want to delete the account because it deletes their files. And in the case of investigation, or if you want someone to take over their job, you might want to have the administrator look at their files. So we want to check that if they are leaving the company. Now, if you don't want them to change the password, which is not a really good security practice, we would select this option. And if the account never expires, we would select this option. So I normally keep the default, go next. Oh, I didn't type in the matching password. Okay. I'm fired for sure. All right. Okay, gives you the summary, click finish. Now, in the case you get a ticket to reset their password, right? The service ticket comes through and the user get locked out of their account, right? You simply right-click the user account and then choose reset password. So when you click reset password button on your internet account, your online account for pay bills and stuff, it goes through this automation process. It resets it, it sends you the prompt where you can fill out your account. It updates your password and even your account information onto their database, right? Which updates the directory. And then server syncs every so often. So that's how you reset. So once I create the user, I can make a new group. I would right-click, new group. And then I'm going to go ahead and type in workers for the group name. And here, remember what we talked about earlier, your global, domain, local, and universal. So we'll just use this. And always use security group. Distribution is more like newsletter, news group, right? So we would, you know how when you enroll into like e-commerce site, like if you subscribe and get coupons or discount from like website that you buy things from, that's like a distribution group. Where security groups are actual user account that would have more interaction and activity. So we would do that, right? So once you have your group, you can double click the group or right click it and choose members. And then you can click add. And we just need to find Kyle. So if you search, right, if you type in the name Kyle Johnson, check names and make sure there's a link. It tells you that this is the user from this domain. Click OK, click apply, click OK, and Kyle is now part of the workers. And then you can add the second user, Dora Hernandez, take a screenshot, and there you have user group. Did it go? Go back to your. So let's do AD without AC. Let's put this one without a zone in it because and then it's gonna want to restart again after that. Then you can, yeah, it's not letting you make a new zone, so it's weird. Okay, so once you have the user accounts and groups, we can do the policy. These are gonna be the rules that are applied to these people. Okay, so we're gonna go to tools. And then you're gonna look for group policy management. And this console pops up. It shows your forest and your domains. So as you expand it, you would see, right, my server, my domain information. And so you're gonna click the forest and you're gonna right click it and you're gonna make a new policy. So here is my, sorry, laggy. My forest, right? And my domain. See how it has some of the default stuff there? So I'm gonna go ahead and expand this. Then I will be able to make a new one. So it's letting me. Yeah, so we're gonna do create a group policy. So you gotta expand all the way to the domain level and you are going to right click your domain and create a group policy object and link it. So we're gonna call it, I'm just gonna call it company GP or workers actually, that's what we need. And click OK. Now we need to edit the policy. So once you create it, right, you're going to see the policy, but you need to edit the policy. Okay, so expand this. We're going to see my workers policy right here. And to edit it, you can right click and click edit. And so this is where I'm at. Step 96. Then what we're going to do is we are going to modify their password policy. So you're going to go policy. I'm sorry. Under computer configuration, this option right here, you're going to expand and follow the breadcrumb. Go to policies, Windows settings, security settings, and then password. So we want them to have lengthy passwords. So under computer configuration, click policy, Windows setting, security settings, and then we can pull this to the right and then be able to do account policy and password policy. This is not defined, so we can make it that they are required to use a password for a certain time. The lengthy password, the complex password, all of those are here. So we would start with changing this for the password age. That's going to be how long they're going to use that same password. That will be 3 months, so 90 days. So you're going to double click the password age, define, and then change that to 90 days. Because if it's not defined, it would just default and there's no rules to apply. So this is a policy, right? A rule that would apply to all the accounts for that group. We will click apply. So it tells you that the minimum is going to be at least 30 days and the maximum is 90 days. Some company would prefer to use the minimum of 0 days. That means that they can change their password right away. So it really depends on what is agreed or how internally that policy is applied. So we can choose the 90 days maximum, and it tells you should set, it puts the 30 days for default, but you can always change it by double click and then modify this value. Minimum, maximum. Okay. The password length, I think nowadays they recommend 12 to 16 characters, right? But most companies still use at least 8. So we would enter the 8 for password length. So go back, double click password length, define. And then change that to 8. Apply and then click OK. So that means that it has to be at least 8 characters long. And then if you want them to have complex password, you can define that. So if I want upper, lowercase, numbers, characters, I would specify that here, just enable. And that would require them to have complex password. Account lockout is where how often can they try wrong password without getting locked out. This is a way that we would control brute force attack. So someone can use continuously, right, variation of different passwords to access a certain account. So simply configuring this policy is useful. So under the account policy, you would go to account lockout. You can put down the duration. You know how sometimes you get locked out for 30 minutes or a day. Basically, we're buying time there, right? Double click this, define the settings. So you can say we can lock them out for 60 minutes or 30 minutes. or if you want that, you need to convert the day to the minutes. So if you want the whole day. Normally, I think an hour is good. It kind of give us time to figure out if that was an attack or not. And then apply it, okay. So it tells me that, oh, the threshold needs to be 5 log on attempts. So if they get it wrong 5 times, it's gonna lock them out for 60 minutes. And then the reset lockout after 10 minutes. So they have to wait 10 minutes to request the reset. But if they don't request, it's just they have to wait an hour. So this is the default option that once I select the 60 minutes and click OK. And then OK. So it fills that in. Allow administrator account lockout. You can enable or disable this. Normally we should define disable. And so once we're done, take a screenshot of this with your policy setting, but there are other policy that you can set up. So that's a quick one. This is often like one of those things that pop up on Security Plus and certification, because everybody should know how to use this in the basic configuration for policy. Okay, and that will wrap up your lab. Let me stop recording and I want to go help some students.